Anna smiled softly to herself, gliding her needle across the crisp white homespun linen. The warm afternoon sun flooded the cozy wooden parlor with golden light, and across her lap rested a nearly finished linen towel adorned with rich red and black embroidered folk patterns. She had imagined this day more than once, the day this very towel would grace her wedding, not just any stranger's wedding, but her own union with Ethan. At that sweet thought, a rosy flush warmed her cheeks, and her heart fluttered with nervous excitement. Suddenly, a heavy boot step creaked on the porch boards of the mudroom. Miller stepped into the parlor, dropped a heavy burlap sack of corn grain by the rough-hewn wall, and wearily wiped his sweat-beaked brow with a checkered handkerchief. Over the past few hard years, he had changed completely. Once a cheerful man who loved to joke and sing gentle evening tunes with his late wife, he now carried an invisible burden on his broad shoulders. Ever since Anna's mother had passed on, the farmhouse had grown painfully quiet and somber. Miller was left alone to raise his daughter, and from that bitter day onward, his greatest, most paralyzing fear was stark poverty. Anna vividly remembered how he used to sit sleeplessly by the cast-iron stove all night long while her mother slowly faded away from a relentless lingering sickness. He had driven miles across Jackson County to find backwoods herbalists, called upon local folk healers, and spent every last dime he owned, yet nothing could save her. Ever since then, the old man would constantly repeat like a somber mantra, "Without a steady livelihood, honey, life is a hard road, a mighty hard road." "Still embroidering that wedding towel of yours?" Miller asked, his eyes catching the flash of red thread. Anna quickly masked her smile with a demure nod. "Just doing it for the pastime, Pa." Her father gave her a long, searching look, as if he wanted to unburden his mind, but instead he simply grunted, turned on his heel, and walked back out into the sun-baked farmyard. But Anna could no longer sit still. Today she was supposed to meet Ethan down by the creek. She hastily tucked the embroidered towel deep into her cedar hope chest and hurried out toward the whispering river. Ethan was already waiting for her beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient weeping willow. The moment he caught sight of her running form, his face broke into such a genuine boyish grin that all her lingering anxieties instantly melted away. "I thought for sure you weren't coming today," he teased. "And I thought for sure you'd be late, Ethan," Anna laughed, her voice ringing clear. They strolled slowly along the muddy riverbank, the water lapping gently against the reeds. Ethan talked about his long hours at the sawmill, sharing how the foreman had promised a slight bump in his weekly wages, before he abruptly stopped in his tracks. "Anna, I've made up my mind. By the time autumn harvest rolls around, I'll have saved up enough extra cash to march right up to your father's porch and ask for your hand." The bright smile on her face faltered instantly. "What if he says no?" she whispered. "Why wouldn't he?" Ethan asked, puzzled. "Because you don't know him the way I do." Ethan let out a heavy sigh, kicking a loose pebble into the current. "I know one thing for certain. I love you with all my heart, and because of that, I'm going to fight for us." Anna remained silent. She loved him just as fiercely, but every time her thoughts drifted to her father, a cold dread pooled in her stomach. "Sometimes I get this awful fear, Ethan." "Fear of what?" he asked gently. "Like there's some terrible misfortune waiting for us just around the bend." Ethan reached out, wrapping his calloused hand tightly around hers. "As long as we're side by side, there's nothing on God's green earth to be afraid of." Then he flashed a reassuring grin and added, "You'll see, we'll build our own little cabin, plant an apple orchard right out back, and fill the rooms with a passel of kids." "And what if our firstborn is a sweet little girl?" Anna teased playfully. "Then she'll be every bit as breathtakingly lovely as her mother." She giggled through a sudden prickle of hot tears stinging her eyes. She wanted with all her soul to believe his every promise. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the distant tree line when they finally parted ways. Ethan stood on the riverbank for a long while, watching her retreating silhouette, while Anna hurried homeward, pressing the warm memory of their meeting close to her pounding chest. Little did she know that this very evening would mark the devastating start of her life unraveling. When Anna finally turned down their dusty lane, her footsteps dragged to a slow halt. Parked right outside their split-rail fence was a large, expensive covered buggy hitched to two exceptionally fine, well-groomed bays. Such luxurious rigs were rarely seen meandering through their quiet farming settlement. Standing right beside her father on the packed dirt was a complete stranger, a prosperous, wealthy man. He was significantly older than Anna, sharply dressed in a fine wool coat and supple, polished leather riding boots. The man cut off mid-sentence and stared intently at the approaching young woman, his gaze so heavy and piercing that it suddenly made her skin crawl with discomfort. Then a slow, deliberate smile crept across his weathered face. At that very look, Anna's heart clenched with a sickening wave of foreboding. Anna lingered by the wooden gate for a few heartbeats, not daring to step onto the farmyard. The wealthy stranger standing next to her father commanded her immediate attention. He was much older than her, exceptionally tall and solidly built, dressed in a tailored wool coat and brand-new boots. Meanwhile, the fine horses by the buggy were nervously pawing the dirt. Such obvious wealth was almost unheard of in their rural farming community. The man halted his conversation mid-word and scrutinized Anna from head to toe. It wasn't an insolent or crude stare, but it lingered far too long for comfort, sending a shiver of unease down her spine. "Ah, and here is my lovely daughter," Miller announced with unmistakable pride. "Good evening, miss," the stranger greeted her politely. "Good evening," Anna murmured back, keeping her eyes cast downward. "This here is Samuel, a prosperous landowner from over in the neighboring township of Pine Ridge. It's a mighty pleasure to make your acquaintance, Anna," Samuel said, offering a charming smile. People weren't exaggerating a bit. "About what?" she asked, blinking in confusion. "About your striking beauty, of course." Miller chuckled with deep satisfaction, while Anna simply stared down at the dust on her shoes. She despised being the center of such conversations, especially when folks talked about her as if she were an object standing miles away rather than right before them. Supper was already laid out on the wooden table inside the dimly lit cabin. Samuel regaled them with endless tales of his sprawling wheat fields, his newly constructed grain mill, his heavy livestock, and his bursting barns filled to the rafters with golden harvest. Anna watched out of the corner of her eye as her father hung on every single word, particularly whenever the talk drifted toward financial abundance and property ownership. "That's a powerful large farm you're running," Miller observed approvingly. "It's substantial, all right," Samuel agreed smoothly. "A heavy load for a man to manage entirely by his lonesome. A widower's life is always a hard plow." "You never took a second wife after your first passed?" Miller pressed quietly. "Things just never aligned that way," Samuel replied with a solemn nod. Anna knew precisely why her father was steering the conversation in that direction. Ever since her mother had drawn her last breath, Miller viewed every eligible widower through a specialized lens, as if searching for a mirror of his own tragic destiny. After the heavy meal was cleared, Anna quietly began washing the cast-iron skillets. Samuel watched her every graceful movement from across the room. "You'll make some lucky man a fine, hard-working homemaker one of these days." "I'm hardly a proper housewife yet, Mr. Samuel," she murmured politely with a nervous smile. "All in good time, miss," he replied smoothly. Those seemingly harmless words sent a fresh wave of panic fluttering in her chest. Once full darkness had settled over the countryside, Samuel finally prepared to leave, but before climbing into his buggy, he asked Miller to walk him out to the horses. The two men paced slowly away from the cabin porch. Anna couldn't make out their murmured words, but she watched through the grimy window as they lingered by the bays, Samuel gesturing expansively while her father nodded thoughtfully several times in agreement. Finally, the men shook hands firmly, and that lingering sense of dread wrapped its icy fingers around Anna's chest once more. That night, sleep completely eluded Anna, and the very next morning, while fetching water down at the communal well, she accidentally overheard two village gossips whispering by the trough. "It's the gospel truth, I tell you. Samuel himself drove right up to their gate alone." "And what's that supposed to mean?" asked the second woman. The older gossip glanced around furtively and lowered her voice to a hiss. "Word has it he's out shopping for a brand new bride." Anna felt the blood instantly drain from her fingertips, numbing her hands on the heavy oak bucket. She hauled the water back in heavy silence and hurried straight home, desperate to convince herself it was nothing more than petty country rumors. But that very evening her father beckoned her over to the kitchen table. He sat down directly across from her, remaining stubbornly silent for a long, agonizing stretch, as if struggling to find the right words. And that oppressive silence made Anna's heart beat a furious tattoo against her ribs. "Now listen here, honey," Miller finally began, his voice rough. "You and I need to have a serious sit-down talk." Anna froze in her tracks, and the very next words out of her father's mouth turned her face completely white. "Samuel didn't come by our yard yesterday for nothing. He wants to take you as his lawful wedded wife." Miller sat in heavy silence after dropping the bombshell, while Anna stared at him blankly, as if she had suddenly lost the ability to comprehend spoken English. "As his wife?" she echoed in a hollow, terrified whisper. "That's right. Samuel is a solid, respectable man, a hard-working landowner, no wild-living drunkard or rowdy gambler. You'd have to search high and low across Jackson County to find a better catch than him." Anna felt panic rising like a hot tide in her throat. "Pa, why on earth are you telling me all this?" "Because he asked about you specifically, and you're at the marrying age." Miller let out a weary, gravelly sigh. "Honey, don't go acting like a naive child. Men of his wealth and standing don't hitch up their horses at our gate every single day of the week." Anna dropped her gaze to her lap. She was already beginning to realize where this sinister road led, and the sheer terror of it gripped her soul. "Pa, you know full well about me and Ethan," she blurted out, her voice trembling. Miller's face hardened instantly into a mask of stone. "So if you already know about that boy, why are you even bringing another man into this house?" she cried. "Because that boy Ethan is simply not in your league." Anna jerked her head up in utter disbelief. "Why ever not?" "Because love is just a fleeting notion, but life itself is a harsh reality. He works hard, sure, but he's dirt poor." "He won't always be poor, Pa, and I won't always be young either," she shot back defiantly. Those brutal words struck her heart like a physical blow. "Listen to me, child. I've lived a good sight longer than you, and I've seen how the world grinds people down." Anna felt hot tears spilling over her eyelids. "You loved Mama just as fiercely once." Miller fell deathly silent. For a long, tense moment, his gaze turned heavy, distant, and haunted. "I loved her with all my soul, which is precisely why I won't let you make the same fatal mistake." He stood up abruptly from the wooden bench and strode over to the dark window pane. "When your poor mother took down sick, I had to sell off half our livestock, and then the other half to pay for her care. I hauled her all the way to wandering herbalists, bought the most expensive mountain roots, begged every doctor for help, but all the silver in the world couldn't stretch far enough. It wasn't enough." Anna sat frozen in absolute silence. She rarely ever heard her father speak of her departed mother. If I had been a wealthy man back then, maybe, just maybe, things would have turned out different. I won't ever stand by and watch you sit helpless beside a dying husband, not knowing where to turn for help. I won't have your babies crying out from hunger in a drafty shack. I won't ever let you shed the kind of bitter tears I've cried." Anna's heart ached with a dull, sickening pain. She could see that her father truly believed he was acting out of love, but that realization only made the suffocating trap feel 10 times heavier. "What if I love Ethan with all my heart and soul?" she asked in a broken whisper. "You think you'll get over it?" her father scoffed bitterly. "It won't fade," she pleaded. "Oh, it always fades. Every young fool thinks their first love is carved in stone." Anna bowed her head in defeat. She knew that immovable tone all too well. Once Miller made up his mind, trying to sway him was like trying to move the granite bluffs of Pine Ridge. "Samuel told me he's coming back for an answer soon." "What for?" she cried out. "To talk about setting the wedding date." Anna sprang up from her chair, her voice cracking in pure desperation. "Well, I won't do it, Pa. I refuse to marry him. I don't even know the man." "You'll get to know him well enough in time." "But I love someone else," she sobbed. "Love won't ever put bread on the table, and shiny coins are what keep a heart beating." Miller furrowed his thick grey brows in anger. "You're just a stubborn girl. Don't you understand a damn thing about the real world?" "No, Pa, it's you who doesn't understand a single thing." She bolted headlong out the front door, barely able to hold back the flood of tears blinding her vision. Her heart felt as if a heavy disaster was already standing on their doorstep. Anna broke into a frantic run down the familiar dirt path winding toward the riverbank. There was only one soul on God's earth who could possibly understand her agony now: Ethan. But little did she know that at this very moment, Ethan had also reached a life-altering decision of his own, having packed his resolve to march right up to Miller's doorstep and demand her hand. Anna ran like the wind along the well-worn path leading to the river. Hot tears blurred her vision, and her chest burned as if an iron hand were squeezing the very breath out of her lungs. Ethan was already sitting beneath the sprawling canopy of the ancient weeping willow, whittling a thin, pliable branch with his pocket-knife to fashion a crude shepherd's pipe. The moment he saw Anna tearing toward him, he leapt instantly to his feet, dropping his knife. "Anna, what in God's name happened?" She skidded to a halt right in front of him, utterly defeated, completely unable to dam up the rushing tears. Ethan grabbed her trembling shoulders, his eyes fierce. "Who dared to hurt you, honey? Tell me." It's my father," she choked out. Ethan's face darkened into a furious scowl. What did he pull this time? Anna swallowed hard, gasping for air between harsh sobs. "A wealthy landowner from the next township over, a man named Samuel. He came by our farm." Ethan stood stock still, staring at her in stunned silence. "And what does he want?" "He wants to take me for his wife." Ethan froze as if struck by lightning, unable to process the words. "What?" "My father has already made up his mind for me. He says you and I aren't in the same league. He says love won't ever fill an empty belly." Anna's voice fractured completely. "And he claims I'll naturally learn to love Samuel once I lay eyes on his wealth and property." Ethan slowly clenched his rough carpenter's fists until his knuckles turned stark white. "And what about you? What did you say?" "You know damn well what I said. I told him I love you and only you." Heavy, oppressive silence settled over them, broken only by the steady, mocking murmur of the river rushing past. Ethan stared off into the distance for a long, agonizing minute, as if turning over complex calculations in his head. Then he lifted his chin with grim determination. "Then I'll go speak to your father myself, Anna." "No, Ethan, it's no use. Number more hiding down by the riverbanks like scared rabbits. If I'm going to be your husband, I need to look that stubborn old man straight in the eye and say it like a man." Anna stared at him, torn between blinding terror and a desperate spark of hope. She knew all too well her father's stubborn, mule-headed disposition, but right now Ethan's fierce recklessness frightened her just as much, unaware that by tomorrow morning a fateful collision between the two men would seal their doom once and for all. Ethan didn't wait a week, nor even a single day. After his parting words with Anna, he spent the entire night pacing restlessly in the cool night air, unable to close his eyes. Samuel's name echoed mercilessly inside his brain. He knew full well that a wealthy landowner could offer a young woman a life of material comfort he could only dream of providing right now. But he also knew a profound truth no coin could buy. Absolutely nobody in this world would ever love Anna with the consuming devotion he felt in his chest. Long before the first pink streaks of dawn painted the sky over the ridge, Ethan stepped outside and walked the lonely riverbank. Every single memory of their stolen meetings beneath the willow, every laugh, every whispered promise played like a movie in his mind. The more he chewed on it, the more violently clear it became. If he backed down now, he would lose her to another man forever. When the golden sun finally crested over the rural hills, he put on his cleanest linen Sunday shirt, smoothed down his dark hair with a wet comb, and marched straight toward Miller's farmstead. His heart hammered so violently against his ribs during the walk that he could barely hear the morning birds chirping in the oak branches above. Pausing at the front gate for a breathless second, he sucked in a lungful of cool morning air and rapped his knuckles hard against the rough wood. Miller was out in the yard, hammering a fresh iron tire onto a heavy wagon wheel. When the old man looked up and spotted the young carpenter standing by the gate, he immediately knew what brought him there. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," Ethan said stiffly. "Morning," the older man replied dryly, not missing a beat with his heavy mallet. "You got something to say to me? Let's hear it." Ethan swallowed the dry lump burning in his throat. "I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." Miller didn't even crack a smile of surprise, as if he had been expecting these exact words for days. He slowly set down his iron hammer, stood up straight, and cracked his stiff spine. "And just what do you think you can offer her to live on?" "My love, my devotion." Miller let out a harsh, mocking bark of laughter. "Love? Is that supposed to buy flour and bacon?" "It's not just love. I work hard every day. I'm saving up every spare coin, and I'm fixing to build my own blacksmith forge. I'm planning to," Ethan stammered, feeling a hot wave of humiliation flush his cheeks. "I'm no lazy farmhand." "I never said you were lazy, boy." "Then what's the real problem here?" "The problem is that my daughter isn't going to spend her days scratching out a miserable living in dire poverty. She won't have to. Where is your house, boy? Where is your cleared land? Where is your established homestead?" Ethan stood completely mute, struck dumb by the undeniable truth. "Give me just 1 year," Ethan finally pleaded, his voice cracking. "Just 12 short months. I'll prove to you I can build a secure life for her." Miller shook his head slowly, his expression immovable. "You don't have a year, son." "Why the hell not?" "Because I've already given my word to another man." Ethan felt the blood freeze solid in his veins. "To Samuel?" "To Samuel," Miller snapped back. "But you didn't even bother to ask Anna what she wants." "I am her father, and I know what's best for her." Ethan clenched his fists until his palms stung. "She doesn't love him. She'll learn to love the security he brings, and if she doesn't, well, at least she'll be sleeping in a warm bed with a full belly." So that's all that matters to you? Just coin and property? That's right. The harsh answer struck like a whip in the quiet farmyard. Heavy, suffocating silence dropped between them like an anvil. Ethan stared at the hardened older man standing before him, realizing for the absolute first time that no amount of honest words would ever pierce that armor of bitter pragmatism. "I love your daughter with all my soul," Ethan said in a quiet, trembling voice. "And I love my daughter far too much to let her tie herself to a pauper like you," Miller shot back coldly. "Now clear out of my yard, boy, before it hurts you worse." Ethan didn't reply. He turned on his heel and walked slowly out the gate without looking back. But right there at the threshold, he made a silent, solemn vow to fight for Anna until his dying breath, unaware that Samuel was scheduled to return to their farm that very same evening. Only a few days had slipped away since Ethan had walked out of their yard in bitter defeat, but to Anna it felt as though an eternity of torture had passed. The atmosphere inside the farmhouse had grown so heavy and dense that it was a struggle just to draw a normal breath. Her father brought up the impending wedding nearly every single day, droning on about the grand upcoming festivities, the boundless financial security, and how comfortably she would live in Samuel's sprawling estate. And every single time Anna sat in miserable silence, knowing full well that any protest would only detonate another screaming match. But tonight she resolved to make one final desperate plea. Miller was sitting by the oil lamp at the wooden table, diligently greasing an old leather harness strap, when his daughter walked up and stood before him. "Pa, we need to talk." He laid down his leather awl and looked up at her with heavy, tired eyes. Anna felt her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Please, don't give me away to Samuel." Miller let out a deep, defeated sigh, as if he had heard these exact pleadings 100 times already. "Here you go, starting up again. Because you refuse to listen to me. I hear you loud and clear, girl. No, if you truly heard me, you wouldn't force me to marry a man my heart utterly rejects." Her father shoved his chair back and stood up to tower over her. "Then just who the hell is it you're so set on? That penniless blacksmith's apprentice, Ethan?" "Yes," she cried out, her voice echoing off the timber walls. "I love him, and I will never stop loving him as long as I draw breath." Miller shook his head in stubborn refusal.